Baghdad hands over the German journalist who had entered Syria illegally to the Russian ambassador in Damascus. Russia and the USA hold a new round of consultations on the Syrian crisis in London next Thursday. Iran calls on the countries that claim to be defenders of the Syrian people to resort to a political solution and encourage national dialogue. Good afternoon, I am Irado Krikorian from the News Center in Damascus. The Deputy Foreign and Expatriates Minister Dr. Faisal al-Muqdad has handed over German journalist Billy Six to the Russian ambassador in Damascus. The German journalist had entered Syria illegally.
During a press conference in the presence of the Russian ambassador in Damascus, Dr. Muqdad said Syria had tried to give journalists the opportunity to cover the events in Syria objectively. The Syrian government always stressed the need for them to get entry visas officially and legally, he stressed. Dr. Muqdad added that some of the reasons that caused the government not to answer the request of some news media men for visas had to do with their own security. Whenever we were able to ensure security for their conditions of work, we never hesitated to give them the visas, he said. The other reason was that many of the journalists did not enjoy the minimum objectivity and neutrality required in order to convey information. On the contrary, they were interested in looking for excitement, Dr. Muqdad emphasized. He stressed that many of the news media men who had illegally entered the country lost their lives at the hand of the terrorist groups whose activities they had covered illegally. Their governments always held the Syrian government responsible for their death, but we've always held their own governments responsible for their fatal end because they allowed them to go to Syria and enter the country illegally, Dr. Muqdad said. We cannot be lenient when the issue is related to the security and safety of the journalists, he added. We look forward to see more of them in the country to convey events objectively and professionally, Dr. Muqdad said. Many Syrian journalists were killed and their death was not accorded due attention by their fellow news media men who alleged to be defending journalists' rights. He reiterated respect for the journalists' right to have access to information, affirming that the Syrian embassies abroad will remain open to allow objective news media men to cover the events in the country. On his part, the Russian ambassador to Damascus, Mr. Azmatullah Kol Mohammedanov, has called on all states to respect Syrian sovereignty because the principle of respect for state sovereignty is the cornerstone of the principles of international law. He said Syria respects the sincere and objective work of foreign journalists and honors the humanitarian principles.
The Russian Foreign Ministry has announced that a new round of consultations between Russia and the USA on the crisis in Syria will be held in London next Thursday. A Russian Foreign Ministry source said the meeting will be held on the sideline of a session to be held in London on Yemen. It will combine Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov and his American counterpart William Burns. The source did not rule out contacts to be held by Bogdanov with UN envoy to Syria Al-Khdar al-Ibrahimi. On his part, Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, has expressed his country's concern over Washington's recent decision to allocate $60 million in support of the Syrian opposition. In a press conference held at the UN headquarters, Churkin said, Washington's decision leads us away from maintaining dialogue between the government and the opposition. The Russian representative said the new round of consultations on the Syrian crisis will be held in light of big differences in viewpoints between Russia and the USA over the crisis in Syria. Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi has called on international organizations, particularly the UN and concerned states, to shoulder their responsibilities in finding a peaceful solution to the crisis in Syria. He referred to the need for the UN to condemn the terrorist explosions that targeted innocent civilians in Syria. Al-Alam satellite channel's website said Salehi denounced in a message addressed to the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon the terrorist blasts against innocent citizens in Syria recently. Salehi said Iran believes that the continuation of violence in the country obstructs reaching a political solution to settle the crisis and shows the extent of the failure of the various sides that seek to realize their own interests in Syria through shaking up the latter's stability. Salehi condemned the policy of double standards pursued by the American administration in combating terrorism, referring to Washington's refusal to denounce the terrorist blasts in Syria. Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesman Ramin Mahmoudparest has said that national dialogue between the government and the opposition at the same table of negotiations is the main precondition for solving the crisis in Syria. In a press conference today, Mahmoudparest said, "We have to support the Syrian people through stopping the violence and starting national dialogue that creates the appropriate atmosphere for elections to be conducted by a provisional transitional government that would meet the demands of the Syrians." He added that all the countries that claim to be supporting defending the Syrian people must resort to political solutions and encourage the initiation of a national dialogue. They also must call on all parties to start such dialogue, he added. However, he went on, "We find a big difference between what such states allege and what they actually do on the ground through receiving and harboring the armed terrorist groups." Director of the Russian Religious and Ethnic Center in the Volga, Rais Slemanov, said that hundreds of extremist Wahhabis from the Russian republics are fighting along with the armed terrorist groups in Syria. Slemanov said that those extremists who gain combatant expertise in Syria do join, upon their return, the secret Wahhabi movement in Tatarstan, and they practice their activities in the Volga. Slemanov pointed out that those terrorists include Dawood Khalilkhayev from Angosha, who leads what is called the Chechen Battalion, in addition to Kairat Wahidov and Salman Bulgarsky from Tatarstan. World media have lately reported many photographed articles revealing that hundreds of terrorists have entered Syria, coming from different countries through Turkey and other neighboring countries for the purpose of killing, destroying and committing acts of sabotage as part of terrorist groups affiliated with al-Qaeda. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden said that U.S. supports opposition in Syria, which is able not only to ensure the security of Syria, but also the whole region, meaning the security of Israel. Biden's statement came at the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee Policy Conference in Washington.
Not make it a secret that we were doing that. We would let our partners know.
With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more news about Syria and the region, and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Nariman Qassam after a short break.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The first shipment of apple from the occupied Syrian Golan has reached the homeland Syria to be marketed here. Opening the local markets for receiving apples from the occupied Golan is part of the determination to support our people in occupied Golan and to enhance their steadfastness in the face of the Israeli occupation, who is hindering their marketing of agricultural products. It is worth noting that the apples of occupied Syrian Golan is included within the Syrian agricultural production. The Minister of Industry has called on the industrial establishments to adhere to the decision of the Cabinet, including the recommendations of the Social and Economic Planning Council for the budget of the year 2013. He also asked not to start implementing new projects during the current year, nor reconstructing projects in tense areas. He stressed the need of meeting citizens' requirements by the ministries concerned with these areas. The establishment of poultry asserted that the Ministry of Agriculture supports the poultry sector. Moreover, the ministry will establish a union for poultry producers, increasing loans for this purpose. It will also boost cooperation with the Ministry of Oil to provide the establishment with the necessary diesel fuel. The ministry will also ask the general establishment of fodder to ensure the needs of poultry. European shares climbed to a fourth-year high amid speculations that the central banks around the world may continue with measures to support the economic recovery, whereas the US index futures slightly changed and the Asian shares rose. The Nikkei index also rose 0.7% after the US shares recovered at the end of trading yesterday. Futures of the Brent crude dropped after a sequence of losses in the 5 previous sessions since January 17th, as the Brent fell to its lowest level in the year 2013, while futures of the US crude oil were high 27 cents per barrel after registering their lowest level this year. In the local market, the 21-carat gold is 4,375 Syrian pounds, at 25 Syrian pounds higher, as the Jewelers Assembly set the price of the Rashadi golden coin at 32,000 Syrian pounds and the English coin at 35,800 Syrian pounds. The euro rose for a second day against the US dollar after a statement showed that services in the 17-nation region contracted less than the economists forecasted in February. The European shared currency rose against most of its 16 major peers after the European finance ministers meeting in Brussels yesterday showed that some nations may be able to loosen the target for the reduction of their deficits. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our economic news for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.